The store phone rang, and the voice on the other end whispered, "Don't turn around." I froze. The receiver pressed awkwardly to my ear. The words were barely audible, like they'd been exhaled through a keyhole. My pulse spiked, not from surprise, but from a kind of preemptive fear, the way a foot hovers over a car brake before you know you'll need it. I was alone, as usual, in the convenience store that had been my second home since high school. The fluorescent lights flickered in irregular pulses, casting long, stuttering shadows along the aisles. The hum of the coolers was a low, omnipresent drone, vibrating through the soles of my shoes and into my skull. Outside, a streetlight buzzed intermittently, and occasional cars slid past, their headlights cutting thin, stark lines across the linoleum floor. "Who is this?" I whispered back, though the sound seemed foolishly loud against the steady mechanical whisper of refrigeration. Silence. Then the whisper again, closer this time, as if the voice had crawled into the room with me. "Don't turn around." I swallowed, forcing my throat to wet itself. Every instinct I had screamed that the voice was not a prank, not a stranger, not a wrong number. It was something else, something patient, something watching. The store felt different now, smaller. Aisles that usually felt just wide enough to navigate felt suffocating. The fluorescent lights above flickered again, once, twice, a heartbeat apart, and I imagined shadows stretching and curling where none had been before. I tried to focus on restocking the chips, to put myself in a routine, but my hands trembled. Bags crinkled too loudly, the sound slicing through the hum like a scream. I told myself it was a customer, that someone had sneaked in when I'd been distracted on the phone. But the registers were empty. The store was empty, and the door to the back office, usually closed, was ajar, though I could swear I'd shut it earlier. I considered turning around, just to see. My mind pictured the worst. A figure slinking between aisles, featureless, waiting. But the whisper returned, so soft I could barely hear it over the cooler hum. "Don't turn around." Couldn't ignore it, but I also couldn't obey it entirely. I tried to listen for movement, to detect any breath, any sound that might betray a presence. Nothing. Only the hum, the occasional flicker of light, the faint scrape of the street outside. Yet I felt it everywhere, the sense of being observed from angles I didn't occupy, a periphery full of eyes I couldn't see. I edged toward the back room, convinced I could corner whatever it was. My footfalls were deliberate, careful, yet each step sounded amplified in the dead stillness. The coolers whispered to themselves, condensation beating and dripping silently into steel troughs. A reflection in the glass door of the soda fridge caught my eye, a fleeting shadow that did not match mine. I blinked and it vanished. I reached the edge of the back room, and the phone on the counter rang again, a shrill, jangling alarm. I jerked toward it. The whisper returned, simultaneously intimate and everywhere. "Don't turn around." I dropped the receiver, and it clattered to the linoleum. My own breathing sounded grotesque in the hollow space. I pressed my back against a shelf, trying to make myself small, trying to disappear into the monotony of canned goods and cleaning supplies. Then I noticed movement in the reflections. The glass of the cooler doors shimmered differently, like heat waves over asphalt, but it was cold. My own reflection lingered, and yet, behind me, in each mirrored surface, I glimpsed another. One just at the edge of my vision, impossibly still, impossibly patient. It mimicked nothing. It waited. I wanted to scream, to bolt, to destroy the mirrors, to run into the fluorescent-lit night. But something rooted me there. Terrible curiosity. A terrible certainty that I shouldn't, that I couldn't. The whisper came again, closer than before, now from all directions at once. "Don't turn around." And then I felt it. Not a shadow, not a shape, but a presence. Cold, static, suffocating, pressing against the back of my neck. My skin crawled, hairs standing rigid. My eyes darted to the reflections, searching for an explanation. I thought about the phones in the back room, the phones in the office. They all sat dead and silent, wires coiled neatly like obedient snakes. There was no one else. I was the only one here, I considered leaving. I considered just walking out into the fluorescent night, past the humming coolers and the echoing tiles, past whatever waited for me in the dark. But then the whisper shifted, intimate now, impossibly close. They can't see you unless you turn around. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. Something shifted in the reflections, subtle, almost imperceptible. A flicker of motion not mirrored by anything in the store. I could feel its attention, coiling, leaning, testing. The lights flickered again, long and deliberate, and in that moment, I realized it was never about hiding. It was about watching, always watching, and it knew me, knew my instincts, knew my desire to resist. I wanted to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the store's humming, by the hum of the refrigerators, by the silence outside that pressed itself against the glass doors. My body moved on its own, towards the phone, towards the exit. Every step felt both mine and not mine, as if the presence was guiding, teasing, waiting. I reached the door. My fingers touched the cold handle. I almost turned the knob, almost ran into the night, almost reclaimed the world outside. But then the whisper slithered around my ear, soft as frost on skin. Turn around and see me. I didn't. I stepped out into the night. The street was empty. The lights were dim. The cool hum of the store lingered in my ears like a second heartbeat. I walked to my car without looking back. Without looking back, I told myself it was over. But even now, when I lie awake, I remember the way the reflections shifted. The way something waited, patient and still, behind the glass. And I wonder, every time I enter a convenience store, am I alone? Or is someone, something, just beyond the reflection, whispering, waiting for the moment I turn around? I still hear it, sometimes, when I pick up a phone late at night. Don't turn around. A customer paid with coins that were ice cold and dripping with salt water. I froze for a moment, staring down at the copper and silver discs sliding across the counter. Each one left a tiny puddle that smelled faintly of the sea, briny and sharp, like the tide had been pressed into metal. I reached for a rag to dry them, but the chill seeped through my fingers anyway, icy and uncanny, as though the coins themselves resisted warmth. The convenience store was nearly empty, the late-night hum of the fluorescent lights above keeping me company, the buzzing monotony of the refrigerators filling the spaces between my breath and the slow tick of the wall clock. Outside, the parking lot lay abandoned, asphalt slick with last week's rain reflecting the dull, orange glow of the street lamps. A single car passed in the distance, headlights slicing thin stripes across the floor-to-ceiling windows. The customer leaned against the counter, a tall figure in a soaked coat, water dripping from the cuffs and pooling quietly on the linoleum. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes, dark and reflective, stayed fixed on me. There was something wrong about him, but not in a way that screamed danger. It was subtler, a discordant note beneath the regular hum of the night, something not quite human. I accepted the coins with a polite nod, trying to ignore the chill crawling up my arms. Rough night, I asked even as I wiped the counter. My words felt hollow, swallowed by the fluorescent flicker. Always rough, he said, voice low, carrying the faint tang of salt. His breath fogged the air slightly as he spoke. The sea doesn't sleep. I hesitated. The store usually smelled of coffee, chips, and bleach from the mop buckets, not brine. And yet, with him here, the scent of wet sand and tide clung to the edges of the air, and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed to vibrate with it. He collected the coins and dropped them into his pocket, leaving wet streaks along the counter. Then he moved toward the door, each step leaving a trace of moisture. I watched him go, shivering despite the warm air of the store, thinking I'd seen nothing more than a strange man, lost and soaked. But the store didn't feel the same after that. The cooler hum seemed to deepen, a low undertone vibrating under the tiles. The light flickered once, twice, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw movement in the reflections of the glass doors. Not mine, not the shelves, but something darker, shifting. I shook my head and tried to focus on straightening the snacks. Then I noticed the coins, the ones he had paid with, still on the counter. I'd assumed he had pocketed them all, but 3 remained, tiny pools of brine pooling around them. I picked them up, the metal biting against my skin with a coldness that seemed alive. I could almost hear the soft crash of waves in their metallic echo, a low, resonant murmur under the fluorescent buzz. I set them aside and wiped the counter, convincing myself it was my imagination. But every so often, the metallic tang returned in the air. When I passed a reflective surface, the glass of the cooler doors, the polished floor, even the glossy wrappers of candy, I could see something ripple behind my reflection, fleeting and peripheral. I tried to leave the store, but the parking lot seemed different, dimmer, wetter, more endless than it had moments ago. The rain had returned, though no clouds were visible. The asphalt glistened unnaturally, reflecting dark shapes in the puddles. Shapes that weren't cars, weren't lampposts. They shifted as I walked, as though the lot itself were breathing. Back inside, I found the coins again. They were no longer on the counter. I'd placed them neatly, but now they lay in the middle of the floor, dripping, clustered together as if seeking something. The chill emanating from them was stronger this time, biting into my hands and arms. My reflection in the coolers didn't match me perfectly. The outline of my form seemed slightly elongated, my movements trailing behind by fractions of a second, delayed and wrong. I considered calling someone, anyone, but the phone on the counter was dead. Nothing in the store answered. No hum from the registers, no beep from the scanner. Even the refrigerators seemed quieter now, their hum reduced to a low, wet gurgle, like water lapping against the hull of a ship. The brine smell thickened, curling into my lungs. I felt the floor beneath me pulse, slick and unsteady. And then I realized the worst thing. It wasn't coming from the coins alone. It was coming from the air, from the walls, from every reflection, every shimmer of light. The store had become a vessel, and the tide had returned with him, or something like him, filling the space with patient, waiting intent. I turned to the cooler, to confront the reflection, and for a heartbeat, I saw him, standing just behind the glass doors, not moving yet undeniably present. Pale, soaked, impossibly still. Not quite human, not quite water. His eyes locked on mine? Or were they the coins? Couldn't tell. Then he was gone, swallowed by the reflected brine, leaving only the faint, echoing splash in my ears. The coins at my feet began to shift, rolling slightly on their own. A trail of moisture formed, leading toward the door. I tried to pick them up, to put them back on the counter, but they resisted, skidding away like fish escaping a net. And then I noticed. Each coin bore something strange, faint etchings I hadn't seen before, tiny, precise carvings of creatures with long, spindly limbs, writhing in circular patterns. The lines glinted with salt. I left the store after that, running into the parking lot, but even the air outside seemed different. The asphalt glistened unnaturally. The streetlights hummed a low, watery tone, and somewhere, beneath it all, the soft crash of waves echoed. The coins followed in my mind, metallic and wet, carrying with them a presence I could feel in the marrow of my bones. I never saw the man again. Not in the store, not in the lot, not in the reflections. But I know he left something behind. Something patient. Something that waited beneath the hum of every fluorescent light, behind every reflection, in the cool hum of every refrigerator. And sometimes, late at night, when no one is around, I can hear it. The soft, metallic splash of coins dropping into water that doesn't exist, and I wonder if he will return, or if the tide has already claimed more than the store.